Tenant claimed my mother gifted her the house before dying, but she doesn't know that the hospice nurse had recorded everything. My mother had been renting out her basement apartment to Francine for 3 years before she got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Francine was the perfect tenant at first. Always paid on time, kept the place clean, even helped my mom with groceries when her arthritis got bad. I lived 2 hours away and was grateful someone responsible was downstairs in case mom needed anything. When mom got sick, I took leave from work to move in and take care of her. Francine was so helpful during those first few weeks, bringing up soup, sitting with mom when I had to run errands, offering to help with anything we needed. Mom appreciated it so much she reduced Francine's rent by half, saying good neighbors were worth more than money. That's when Francine started getting too comfortable. She began using the main floor like it was hers, cooking in mom's kitchen instead of her own downstairs, doing laundry at all hours, having people over without asking. When I mentioned it to mom, she was too tired from chemo to care and said to let Francine be since she was helping so much. But Francine's help started coming with strings. She'd sit with mom and talk about how hard it was being a single woman with no family, no inheritance coming, no safety net. She'd cry about how she'd probably die alone in some state-run facility because she couldn't afford better. Mom would comfort her, which was insane because mom was the one actually dying. Francine started asking mom about her will, saying she just wanted to make sure mom's wishes were clear. She'd bring up stories about families fighting over estates and how important it was to have everything in writing. Mom told her everything was already handled through her lawyer, but Francine kept pushing, saying lawyers couldn't be trusted, and family members always contested wills. 2 months before mom died, Francine suddenly had paperwork she wanted mom to sign. She said it was just to formalize their friendship, some kind of document saying Francine had been like a daughter to her. Mom was on heavy pain medication by then, barely conscious most days. I found Francine trying to guide mom's hand to sign something and kicked her out of the room. She said she was just helping mom write thank you cards. There were no cards anywhere. After mom passed, I started the estate process. The house was left to me and my brother equally, just like mom had always planned. We were going to sell it and split the proceeds. I gave Francine 30 days notice to vacate, which was generous considering the circumstances. She said she understood and would start looking immediately. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my mom's lawyer saying someone was contesting the will. Francine had shown up at his office with a handwritten document supposedly signed by my mother leaving her the entire house. The document was dated 1 week before mom died, when mom couldn't even hold a spoon anymore. Francine claimed mom had called her to her bedside and dictated this new will, that mom wanted her to have the house because I'd abandoned her and only came back when she was dying. The signature was shaky, but Francine said that was because mom was weak. She'd even gotten 2 witnesses to sign it, both random people she'd found at a bus stop, and paid $50 to come inside and watch a dying woman supposedly sign a paper. My lawyer said it was obviously fraudulent, but we'd still have to go through the legal process. Francine immediately stopped paying rent and started telling everyone she owned the house. She changed the locks on the basement apartment, put up no trespassing signs, and started parking in mom's spot in the garage. She listed rooms for rent online, saying she'd just inherited a house and needed help with expenses. When I confronted her, she said I was trespassing on her property and called the police. The officer said it was a civil matter, and until the court decided, she had a right to stay. What Francine didn't know was that mom's hospice nurse Carla had been documenting everything. Carla had gotten suspicious of Francine early on when she kept finding her in mom's room going through drawers. She started using her phone to record her visits, saying it was for medical documentation, but really she was protecting mom. Carla had 23 videos from the week Francine claimed mom signed the new will. In every single one, mom was either unconscious or completely incoherent from medication. One video from the exact day of the supposed will showed mom unable to even recognize me, her own daughter. There was no way she could have dictated a legal document. Carla also had a video from 3 days before that showed Francine practicing mom's signature on a notepad while mom slept. She'd left the notepad behind and Carla had kept it. The practice signatures matched the will signature exactly. Same weird loops, same shaky lines, everything. At the hearing, Francine's witnesses admitted they'd never actually seen mom sign anything. They'd just signed where Francine told them to after she'd explained this poor dying woman wanted to leave her something. Francine tried to say that Carla was lying, that mom had moments of clarity not caught on camera. The judge asked Francine to explain why mom's signature on the will matched her practice attempts exactly. Francine's answer made the judge laugh. She stammered out something about similar handwriting styles running in families, which made absolutely no sense since we weren't related at all. Judge Kaufman's eyebrows shot up so high they almost disappeared into his hairline, and he leaned forward in his chair. He asked if she was seriously claiming my mother somehow inherited Francine's handwriting, and I heard a few people in the gallery behind me actually laugh out loud. Francine's face turned bright red and she looked down at her hands, and her lawyer Ariana jumped up from her seat. Ariana said her client was confused by the pressure of testimony and needed a moment to collect her thoughts. The judge stared at Ariana for a long second, before cutting through all the deflection with one direct question. He asked Francine to explain why her practice signatures from 3 days before the alleged will signing matched the will signature exactly, including the same unusual loop on the capital letters. Francine opened her mouth and closed it twice before finally saying she was just doodling my mother's name out of affection and respect. The judge's expression shifted from skeptical to openly disgusted, and he asked how many people doodle their landlord's signature repeatedly. The courtroom went completely silent, and I could hear someone's phone buzzing in their pocket. Virginia stood up and walked to the evidence table, picking up the notepad Carla had saved. She pointed out that Francine had practiced the signature at least 40 times with progressive refinement, getting better and better with each attempt. Judge Kaufman took the notepad from Virginia and examined it closely, flipping through the pages slowly. He asked Ariana if she had any explanation for why someone would need 40 practice attempts to write an affectionate doodle. Ariana had no good answer and she requested a brief recess, but the judge denied it immediately. He said they were going to continue until they got to the bottom of this obvious fraud. Virginia returned to her seat and squeezed my hand under the table. Judge Kaufman said he wanted to see all 23 of Carla's videos in chronological order, and the bailiff set up the projection screen. We spent the next 90 minutes watching my mother's final week in painful detail that made my chest hurt. In every single video, Mom was either completely unconscious or so incoherent she couldn't recognize me standing right next to her bed. She stared at nothing, her mouth hanging open, her eyes unfocused and glazed. The video from the exact date of the supposed will showed Mom unable to even track movement with her eyes, just staring blankly at the ceiling while Carla checked her vital signs. I watched myself in one video trying to get Mom to drink water and she couldn't even swallow properly. Tyler reached over from his seat behind me and put his hand on my shoulder. Ariana tried to argue that the videos didn't cover every single minute of every day, so there could have been moments of clarity in between recordings. Judge Kaufman asked if she was seriously suggesting that a woman who couldn't recognize her own daughter somehow had the mental capacity to dictate a detailed legal document changing her will. His tone made it crystal clear he found this argument insulting to everyone's intelligence, and Ariana sat back down without another word. Virginia called Carla to the stand and she walked up calmly, wearing her blue scrubs and white sneakers. Carla explained her documentation process in a professional voice, describing how she started recording after catching Francine going through my mother's personal papers and jewelry box multiple times. Francine had claimed she was organizing for Mom, but Carla found her with Mom's diamond earrings in her hand once. The judge asked why Carla didn't report this immediately, and she explained she wanted solid evidence before making accusations against someone who might have innocent intentions. Carla described the day she witnessed Francine practicing the signature, explaining she'd arrived early for her shift around 6 in the morning. She found Francine alone in Mom's room with the notepad, hunched over the bedside table. When Francine noticed Carla watching from the doorway, she quickly stuffed the notepad under the bed and said she was just writing a grocery list. Carla retrieved the notepad after Francine left and locked it in her medical supply bag in her car. Judge Kaufman thanked Carla for her diligence and asked if she'd encountered this kind of exploitation of dying patients before. Carla said yes, 3 times in her 12 years as a hospice nurse, and each time it made her sick. During cross-examination, Ariana tried to suggest Carla had a financial motive for helping me since I might reward her. Carla stated calmly that she'd never asked for or received anything beyond her normal hospice salary, and she wouldn't accept payment for doing the right thing. Virginia objected that this was speculation without evidence, and the judge sustained it while looking annoyed at the desperate tactic. Ariana sat down looking defeated, shuffling papers on her table without looking up. The judge called a lunch recess, and I finally got to thank Carla properly in the hallway outside the courtroom. She told me she'd seen too many vulnerable elderly people taken advantage of in their final days, and she wasn't going to let it happen to my mother if she could help it. We both cried a little and hugged, and Tyler joined us to express his gratitude as well. He told Carla she was a hero, and she shook her head, saying she just did her job the way it should be done. After lunch, Virginia called the forensic document examiner who analyzed both the practice signatures and the will signature. He was a thin man in his 50s wearing glasses and a gray suit. He testified that the signatures were identical in every measurable way, including pressure points, letter formation, and even the same slight tremor pattern. He brought up enlarged photos of both signatures on the screen, pointing out specific matching characteristics with a red laser pointer. He stated with absolute certainty that the same hand wrote both the practice attempts and the final will signature, and there was zero possibility of coincidence. The examiner pulled out another document from his folder and laid it on the projector screen for everyone to see. He pointed to Mom's signature from her mortgage refinance 2 years before the cancer diagnosis, showing how her letters had strong, even pressure and flowed smoothly across the page. Then he switched to the disputed will signature, and the difference was obvious even from where I sat. The will signature had these weird stops and starts, like someone had lifted the pen multiple times while writing each letter. He explained that when people forge signatures, they have to keep checking their reference and repositioning the pen, which creates those hesitation marks. Mom's real signature never had them because she'd signed her own name thousands of times and didn't need to think about it. Judge Kaufman leaned forward in his chair and asked if there was any medical condition or medication that could make someone's signature change so dramatically. The examiner said no, that even with tremors or weakness, the basic characteristics of how someone forms letters stays consistent. He stated that in his professional opinion, there was absolutely no possibility the will signature was authentic. Ariana stood up looking pale and asked for permission to recall Francine to the stand. The judge allowed it, and Francine walked back up looking like she might throw up. Ariana asked her to explain in her own words what happened the day Mom supposedly signed the will. Francine took a deep breath and launched into this story about how Mom had suddenly opened her eyes and called her name clearly, asking her to come close. She claimed Mom told her that she wanted Francine to have the house because Francine had been more of a daughter than her real children, who only showed up when it was convenient. Francine said Mom's hand was shaking so badly that she had to guide it to help her sign, and that Mom smiled afterward and squeezed her hand before falling back asleep. The whole thing sounded like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror 50 times. Her voice had this rehearsed quality, and she kept pausing in weird places like she was remembering her lines. Virginia stood up for cross-examination, and her first question cut right through the bullshit. She asked why, if Mom was too weak to sign her own name, Francine didn't call me or Tyler, who were actually in the house at the time. Francine's face went red, and she stammered something about Mom specifically asking her not to tell us, because she knew we'd try to talk her out of it. Virginia pulled out a stack of phone records and walked them over to Francine, asking her to look at the highlighted calls. The records showed Mom had called me every single morning at 8:30 for months, right up until 3 days before she died when she became too sick to use the phone. Virginia asked how Mom could be angry enough at me to cut me out of her will, but still call me every day to chat about her garden and the birds at her feeder. Francine just sat there with her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She finally said she didn't know about the phone calls, and maybe Mom was confused about her feelings. Virginia moved in closer and asked about the practice signatures. She wanted to know why Francine needed to practice Mom's signature 40 times if Mom was supposedly guiding her hand during the actual signing. Francine's answer made no sense at all. She claimed she'd been practicing beforehand just in case she needed to help Mom sign something, like she was preparing for the possibility. Virginia pointed out that planning ahead to forge someone's signature is literally the definition of premeditated fraud. Francine started crying and saying she just wanted some security for her future, that she'd spent 3 years taking care of the house and helping Mom, and she deserved something for all that work. She kept saying she truly believed Mom wanted her to have it based on all their conversations, like that made the forgery okay somehow. Judge Kaufman held up his hand to stop the testimony and addressed Francine directly. He asked her a simple yes or no question about whether she had forged Mom's signature on the will. Ariana immediately jumped up and advised Francine not to answer, but the judge said that was fine and her silence would be noted in the record. The courtroom went completely quiet while everyone waited to see what Francine would do. After what felt like forever, she wiped her eyes and said in this tiny voice that she'd helped with the signature because she truly believed it was what Mom wanted based on everything Mom had told her. She kept saying the word helped like it was different from forged, but everyone in that room knew exactly what she was admitting to. Judge Kaufman didn't waste any time with his ruling. He stated clearly that the handwritten will was completely fraudulent and had no legal validity whatsoever. He declared that Mom's original will filed with her attorney would stand as her true final wishes. He ordered Francine to vacate the property within 10 days and said he was referring the entire matter to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Francine broke down sobbing with her face in her hands, while Ariana patted her shoulder and tried to comfort her. The judge banged his gavel and said court was adjourned, and suddenly it was over. Tyler grabbed my hand and squeezed it hard, and I realized I was shaking. Outside the courthouse steps, Tyler pulled me into a huge hug, and we just stood there holding each other while people walked past us. Virginia came out a few minutes later with her briefcase and explained that now we needed to proceed with the formal eviction process since we had a court order. She said she'd handle all the paperwork and make sure the sheriff's office was involved to prevent any problems during the move-out. I told her I felt relieved but also completely drained from having to relive Mom's final days in front of a room full of strangers. Virginia said that was normal and that we should go home and rest because the hard part was over. That evening my phone rang, and it was Virginia saying the district attorney wanted to talk about the case. She conferenced in this guy named Mikhail Solis, who had a deep voice and sounded very official. He explained that based on all the evidence presented in court, his office would be filing criminal charges against Francine for forgery, attempted fraud, and elder abuse. He said the elder abuse charge was particularly serious because she'd targeted a dying woman who was vulnerable and unable to protect herself. Virginia told me afterward that this meant Francine would face real consequences beyond just losing the house, possibly including jail time and a permanent criminal record. The following week, 2 sheriff's deputies showed up at the house to oversee Francine's move-out. They were there to make sure she didn't damage anything or try to steal Mom's belongings on her way out. Francine had rented a truck and spent the whole day loading her stuff while Tyler and I watched from the front porch. She wouldn't look at us or speak to us, just moved back and forth between the basement apartment and the truck with boxes and furniture. When the truck was finally packed and she drove away, I felt this weird mix of relief and sadness. I walked down to the basement apartment expecting to find it trashed, but it was actually surprisingly clean. She'd swept the floors and wiped down the counters like she wanted to leave with some tiny shred of dignity intact. Tyler came over the next few days and we started going through Mom's belongings together. something we hadn't been able to do properly while dealing with Francine's fraud case. We found boxes of photo albums in the hall closet showing Mom as a young woman before we were born, and letters she'd saved from her own mother. There were little treasures everywhere, like the ceramic bird collection she'd kept on the kitchen windowsill, and her recipe cards with notes in the margins about which dishes we'd liked as kids. It hurt to go through everything, but it also felt healing, like we were reclaiming Mom's real memory from what Francine had tried to steal. We spent hours sitting on the living room floor surrounded by Mom's life, remembering who she actually was before the cancer took her away from us. 2 weeks dragged by after the hearing while Tyler and I tried to return to normal life. I went back to work but couldn't concentrate on anything, just kept refreshing my email waiting for updates. Tyler called me every other day asking if I'd heard anything from Virginia or the district attorney's office. We were both anxious to know what would happen to Francine now that the judge had referred her case for criminal prosecution. Finally, my phone rang one Tuesday afternoon while I was sitting at my desk pretending to review spreadsheets. It was Mikhail Solis from the district attorney's office. He got right to the point and told me Francine had accepted a plea deal that morning. She would plead guilty to forgery and attempted fraud in exchange for 2 years probation, community service hours, and full restitution for all our legal fees. My first reaction was anger because 2 years probation seemed like nothing for what she'd tried to do. Mikhail must have sensed my disappointment because he explained that while he understood we wanted harsher punishment, this deal guaranteed a conviction without putting us through the stress and expense of a criminal trial. He said trials were unpredictable, and juries could be sympathetic to a woman claiming she was just trying to secure her future. The plea deal meant Francine would have a permanent criminal record for fraud and forgery, which would follow her for the rest of her life. She'd never be able to rent another apartment without that conviction showing up on background checks. I thanked Mikhail and immediately called Tyler to tell him the news. He was quiet for a long moment before saying he guessed it was better than nothing, and at least we'd get our legal fees back. Virginia called me the next week to schedule a meeting at her office to finalize all the estate paperwork. Tyler and I sat across from her desk while she walked us through document after document that needed signatures. The house officially transferred to us as co-owners exactly the way Mom had intended in her real will. Virginia asked what we planned to do with the property, and Tyler and I looked at each other before I said we wanted to sell it. Neither of us could imagine living there after everything that had happened with Francine. The house felt tainted now, like every room held memories of Mom's final suffering and Francine's betrayal mixed together. Tyler agreed and said he thought Mom would understand that we needed to move forward rather than staying stuck in the past. Virginia recommended a real estate agent she'd worked with before, and within a week we had the house listed at a fair market price. The agent warned us it might take months to sell given the current market, but we got an offer after just 3 weeks. A young couple with 2 kids fell in love with the backyard and the finished basement apartment, which they wanted to use as a home office. We accepted their offer, and the closing happened fast. When the sale finally went through and the money hit our accounts, Tyler and I each walked away with enough to make real changes in our lives. He used his half to pay off student loans and put a down payment on a condo closer to his job. I paid off my car and put the rest into savings for the first time in years. Before I did anything else with the money, though, I called Carla and asked if I could meet her for coffee. She seemed surprised but agreed, and we met at a cafe near the hospital where she still worked doing hospice care. I brought an envelope with a check inside for an amount equal to 6 months of her salary. When I slid it across the table and told her what it was for, she immediately pushed it back and said she couldn't accept it. She insisted she'd just been doing her job and protecting a vulnerable patient the way any good nurse would. I pushed the envelope back toward her and explained that without her diligence and moral courage, Francine might have actually gotten away with stealing our mother's house. Carla had gone above and beyond by documenting everything on video and keeping that notepad with the practice signatures. Most people would have looked the other way or convinced themselves it wasn't their business to get involved. I told her that Mom would have wanted her to have something for protecting her final wishes when she couldn't protect herself anymore. Carla's eyes filled with tears, and she finally accepted the check. She said knowing she'd helped protect a patient's final wishes and stopped someone from being exploited meant everything to her. We talked for another hour about Mom and about Carla's work with other hospice patients. She told me stories about families who came together during difficult times and others who fell apart fighting over money and possessions. It made me grateful that Tyler and I had stayed united through the whole ordeal with Francine instead of letting it drive us apart. 6 months after Mom died, Tyler and I finally felt ready to scatter her ashes like she'd requested in her real will. She'd specified her favorite park where she used to take us as kids, a place with walking trails around a small lake and huge oak trees everywhere. We picked a quiet Sunday morning in early fall when the leaves were just starting to change colors. Tyler brought his wife and I brought a small bouquet of Mom's favorite flowers. We walked to a spot by the lake where Mom used to sit and feed the ducks, and Tyler opened the urn while I held the flowers. We took turns scattering handfuls of ash into the water and under the oak trees. Tyler said a few words about how much Mom had loved this place and how she'd want to be part of the natural beauty she'd always appreciated. I talked about how Mom would have been horrified that someone she trusted had tried to exploit her final days, but also how proud she'd be that we'd fought for the truth and won. We stood there for a while watching the water and remembering good times before the cancer, before Francine, before everything got complicated. Life felt more settled now with the house sold and the legal battle finished. I still thought about Mom every day, and probably always would, but the sharp grief had softened into something I could carry without it crushing me. I knew I'd always be more cautious about trusting people after watching how Francine had manipulated someone as kind as Mom. But I was also grateful the legal system had worked when we had solid evidence and people like Carla who cared enough to document the truth. Tyler and I walked back to our cars and hugged goodbye, both of us feeling like we'd finally given Mom the peaceful ending she deserved.